Some men think they can control everything: money, power, even people's lives. But what happens when the game they play turns against them? Before we dive in, grab a warm cup of coffee, sit back, and stay until the end, because this story has twists you won't see coming. And don't forget to like, share, and comment on your thoughts after watching. Miami Beach, a lavish rooftop party at the Golden Summit Hotel. The city lights stretch endlessly beneath the sky, a spectacle of wealth and power. Expensive champagne flows like water, and the laughter of the elite echoes through the air. And at the center of it all sits a man who believes he owns the world. Nathan Caldwell, billionaire, ruthless, a man who thrives on risk, who sees life as nothing more than a battlefield where the strongest survive. He leans back in his chair, his signature smirk plastered on his face as he twirls a crystal glass of whiskey in his hand. Across from him, his longtime rival, Derek Vaughn, watches with an amused glint in his eye. Vaughn knows Nathan, knows his hunger, his obsession with control. So tonight, he's about to dangle the ultimate challenge. "Let's raise the stakes, Caldwell," Vaughn taunts, swirling his own drink. Nathan arches an eyebrow, intrigued. "I don't back down from a challenge. What's the game?" Vaughn leans in, a devilish grin forming. "I bet you wouldn't have the guts to marry someone completely out of your league." The surrounding crowd erupts in murmurs. Everyone knows Nathan's taste: models, heiresses, socialites who worship the ground he walks on. But Vaughn isn't talking about that kind of woman. He pulls out his phone, swipes through a few photos, and slides it across the table. On the screen is a woman unlike anyone Nathan has ever been seen with. Her name? Sophia Devereaux. A woman who doesn't fit the conventional beauty standards of Miami's elite. A woman with a past, a survivor, a fighter. And most importantly, a woman who doesn't bow down to men like Nathan Caldwell. The crowd goes silent, waiting for his reaction. Nathan lets out a low chuckle, his arrogance dripping with confidence. "That's it? That's the challenge?" Vaughn smirks, taking a slow sip of his drink. "Oh, I'm not done. You have to stay married to her for 6 months. No leaving, no running, and if she leaves first, you lose." Nathan's jaw tightens for a brief second. Losing isn't an option. Not to Vaughn. Not in front of all these people. "And what's the prize?" he asks. Vaughn leans back, eyes gleaming with mischief. $5 million. But let's be honest, Nathan. It's not about the money for you, is it? It's about proving you can break anyone, that no one can resist you. The room watches, breath held. Will Nathan take the bet? A slow, dangerous smile spreads across his lips. Consider it done. He raises his glass, locking eyes with Vaughn. The game has begun. A dimly lit bookstore in a quiet part of town. Sophia Devereaux stands behind the counter, flipping through the pages of a worn-out novel. Unlike the glittering world Nathan belongs to, she exists in a different universe. One built on struggle, resilience, and quiet strength. And tonight, she is about to become a pawn in a game she never signed up for. As she places the book down, her phone buzzes. A number she doesn't recognize. A call that will change her life forever. She answers. "Sophia Devereaux?" The voice on the other end is smooth, confident. A voice that belongs to a man who thinks he can own anything. Nathan Caldwell has just made his first move. What will happen when Sophia realizes the truth behind this marriage? Will she play along, or will she flip the entire game against Nathan? And most importantly, who will end up truly winning? Stay tuned, because this story is just getting started. What would you do if you were in Sophia's position? Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. The air in the restaurant was thick with tension, though on the surface, it appeared just another high-end establishment in Miami's wealthiest district. The chandeliers cast a golden glow over the room, the hum of soft jazz mingling with hushed conversations and the occasional clink of expensive glassware. Nathan Caldwell sat at a private table, perfectly composed, the very image of power and control. He had arrived first, as always, because in his world he dictated the terms. He didn't wait on anyone, people waited for him. But then she walked in. Sophia Devereaux moved through the restaurant with an ease that suggested she belonged anywhere she chose to be. No hesitation, no uncertainty. She wasn't dressed in the extravagant designer gowns that Nathan's usual dates adorned themselves with. Instead, she wore a sleek black dress, elegant, understated, commanding. There was no desperate attempt to impress, no performative femininity, just confidence. Nathan observed her with interest, his mind already making calculations. She's not intimidated. That's new. As she reached the table, she didn't hesitate. No nervous glance at the luxury surrounding her. No hesitation before meeting his gaze. Instead, she pulled out the chair across from him and sat down like she was the one who had called this meeting. Nathan smiled, leaning forward slightly, his voice smooth and measured. Sophia Devereaux. She tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. Nathan Caldwell. A beat of silence, not the uncomfortable kind. The kind where two people silently assess each other, both aware that something unspoken is already unfolding. He studied her, expecting to see some trace of nervousness, some flicker of intimidation. It never came. Finally, he broke the silence. You know why we're here. Sophia leaned back in her chair, crossing one leg over the other with a slow, deliberate movement. I do. Nathan's smile widened slightly. He liked control. He liked predictability. And he liked winning. This question mark. This was a game, and he already knew how it would end. I assume Vaughn told you everything? Her lips twitched, something close to amusement, but not quite. If by everything you mean the part where you agreed to marry me for a bet, then yes, I'm aware. Nathan was prepared for shock, for hesitation, for anger. He wasn't prepared for calm acceptance. He masked his surprise quickly. And yet you still agreed to meet. Sophia reached for the glass of water in front of her, taking a slow sip before placing it back down. When she spoke, her voice was level, smooth as silk. Let's get something straight, Nathan. I know exactly what this is. A game. A power play. A way for you to prove that you can manipulate and control anyone, including me. Nathan chuckled, leaning back. Harsh words for someone about to be my wife. Sophia didn't blink. Don't mistake my willingness to sit here as submission. I agreed to this because I have my own reasons, but make no mistake, I am not your conquest. For the first time, Nathan felt something unfamiliar, an itch beneath his skin. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. He was the one who dictated the terms. He was the one who led the dance. Yet somehow Sophia had taken the lead without even trying. He straightened slightly. You think you can outmaneuver me? A soft laugh escaped her lips. I think you're underestimating me. Nathan studied her, searching for cracks, for some sign that she was bluffing. But there were none. She's different. He had built an empire on reading people, exploiting their weaknesses, bending them to his will. But Sophia wasn't bending. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded document, sliding it across the table. What's this? He asked. She gestured at it with an elegant flick of her wrist. My terms. Nathan raised an eyebrow, unfolding the paper. He skimmed it quickly, his expression darkening. No control over her career, no financial dependency, no interference in her personal life, and after 6 months, she walks away first. Nathan's fingers tightened around the paper. You're dictating the terms of our marriage? Sophia tilted her head slightly. You think because you initiated this game, you get to make the rules? She leaned forward, her voice dropping just slightly. I don't play by other people's rules, Nathan. I never have. For the first time in a long time, Nathan Caldwell didn't have a response. Sophia took another sip of water, completely unbothered by the storm brewing behind his gaze. Then she stood. Nathan followed her movement, watching as she smoothed down the fabric of her dress. She met his gaze one last time, her expression unreadable. I'll see you at the wedding. And just like that, she turned and walked away, leaving Nathan sitting there, holding a contract he never expected, in a game he no longer had full control over. The weight of realization settled in his chest. For the first time in his life, Nathan Caldwell was unsure of one thing. Who was really playing who? The wedding had been nothing but a transaction, a cold, calculated exchange between two people who knew exactly what they were getting into. There was no love, no passion, just an unspoken contract between predator and prey. Or at least, that's what Nathan Caldwell thought. He had expected Sophia Devereaux to fall in line, to bend under the weight of his wealth, to be seduced by the golden handcuffs of luxury. He had played this game before: lavish gifts, extravagant vacations, the kind of treatment most women would kill for. But Sophia wasn't most women. And for the first time in his life, Nathan Caldwell was losing. Their first week as husband and wife passed in silence. Not the comfortable kind. The tense, suffocating kind that turned every interaction into an unspoken war. Nathan, ever the strategist, decided to attack first. The penthouse was his battlefield, and he used every weapon in his arsenal. A black American Express card casually placed on the kitchen counter, a closet filled with designer gowns, tags still intact, a set of keys to a brand new Rolls-Royce parked just outside. Yet, each offering was met with the same reaction: indifference. Sophia moved through the penthouse like a ghost, untouched by the temptation that had once made women weak at the knees. She didn't acknowledge the gifts, didn't even spare them a second glance. Nathan watched in growing frustration, waiting for her to break. She never did. One night, after an exhausting day of failed mind games, Nathan decided to escalate. He strode into the dining room, where Sophia sat reading a book, unbothered by his presence. A pristine black velvet box dangled from his fingers. With a smirk, he flipped it open. Inside, a diamond necklace sparkled under the chandelier's glow. A statement piece, a symbol of power, the kind of thing women begged for. Nathan set the box down in front of her with a smug confidence, arms crossed, waiting. Sophia looked at the necklace, then back at him. Slowly, she reached forward. For a split second, he thought he had won. Then, with an almost lazy motion, she shut the box and slid it back toward him. Nathan's smirk faltered. "You don't like it?" Sophia finally met his gaze, amusement flickering in her eyes. "I like it fine. But if I wanted a diamond necklace, Nathan, I'd buy it myself." Silence. The air between them turned razor sharp. Nathan clenched his jaw, staring at her, trying to decipher whether she was bluffing. She wasn't. He picked up the box. Then, with a sharp, deliberate movement, he threw it across the room. The velvet case hit the wall with a soft thud, falling to the ground, the diamonds inside glinting mockingly at him. But Sophia didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled. A slow, knowing smile that sent something sharp twisting in his chest. She leaned back in her chair, utterly composed. "Losing control, are we?" Nathan's hands curled into fists. For the first time, he realized he wasn't the hunter in this game. After that night, Nathan doubled down. He tried to control her time, insisting she no longer needed to work. She ignored him and went anyway. He started manipulating their schedules, making her wait hours for simple conversations. She never reacted. He arranged exclusive dinner parties, expecting her to be his arm candy. She attended, but never played the role he wanted. It was driving him insane. Women had always melted under his attention, submitted to his authority, surrendered to his world. But not Sophia. She was a fortress, one he couldn't break. And with each passing day, Nathan felt something foreign creeping into his bones. Panic. A week later, he tried again. This time with something more personal, more calculated. He arranged for her favorite author to attend a private book event. An exclusive invitation, something money couldn't buy. That night, he sat at the head of the dining table, swirling a glass of whiskey, watching as Sophia entered the room. "I got you something," he said smoothly. She arched an eyebrow, waiting. Nathan pulled a sleek white envelope from his jacket and placed it on the table. "An evening with—" "Let me stop you right there," Sophia interrupted. Nathan frowned. She stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, placing her hands on the table. Then she leaned in. "You still don't get it, do you?" Her voice was soft, almost pitying. Nathan stared at her, silent. Sophia let out a slow exhale, shaking her head. "You think control comes in the form of gifts, schedules, and manipulation. But real control? It's never about those things. Real control is knowing you don't need to prove anything to anyone, and that's what's killing you. She straightened, grabbing the envelope from the table. Then, without even opening it, she tore it in half. Nathan's fingers dug into the armrest of his chair. His pulse roared in his ears. Sophia's expression never changed. She just turned and walked away, leaving Nathan sitting there, suffocating under the weight of something he had never felt before: powerlessness. As the days passed, Sophia's hold over him only grew stronger, but not in the way he expected. She wasn't winning through control. She was winning by simply existing outside of his influence. And Nathan, for the first time, realized something terrifying. He wasn't just losing the game, he was losing himself. Because in a life where he had always dictated the rules, always held the power, Sophia Devereaux had just rewritten them. What comes next? Will Nathan finally break, or will he fight back harder than ever? And most importantly, who is truly in control? Comment below. If you're loving this story, drop a 1 and hit subscribe for the next chapter. If you don't like it, well, hit like anyway. Let's keep the game going. The air inside the penthouse was electric with tension, the kind that clung to the walls like a silent storm, waiting to erupt. Nathan Caldwell was losing control. And for a man like him, that was unacceptable. Sophia Devereaux had spent weeks dismantling his carefully constructed world, not by attacking, not by fighting, but by refusing to play his game. She moved with quiet defiance, untouched by his attempts to bend her to his will. And the more he failed, the more desperate he became. So Nathan did what he did best. He escalated. Sophia had always been independent. Her work, her passion, it was what defined her. And Nathan knew that if he couldn't control her heart, he could at least control the one thing that mattered to her most. One morning, she arrived at her publishing house, only to find her keycard no longer working. Confused, she tried again. The same red denial light blinked back at her. "Miss Devereaux?" The security guard stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. "I'm going to need you to come with me." Minutes later, she stood inside the CEO's office, arms crossed as she listened to the man she had worked for over 5 years stumble through an apology he didn't want to give. "There's nothing I can do," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. "Your contract has been terminated. It came from higher up." Sophia didn't need to ask who that higher power was. Nathan. She exhaled slowly, jaw tightening. "You fired me," she said, more of a statement than a question. The CEO flinched. "Not me. I had no choice." Sophia let out a short, humorless laugh. She should have seen this coming. Of course he'd try to strip her of everything he couldn't control. She took a step forward, voice calm but sharp as a blade. "Let me make something clear. I built my career without your money, without your name, and I sure as hell don't need it now." Then she turned on her heel and walked out. She wasn't broken. She wasn't defeated. She was furious. Nathan had expected Sophia to come home that night angry, maybe even shaken. He had wanted that. Instead, she walked through the door with the same unreadable expression, setting her bag down before heading straight to the kitchen for a glass of water. Not a single word. Not a single reaction. It was driving him insane. Finally, he broke the silence. "You're home early." Sophia took a sip of water, glancing at him from across the room. "I got fired." Nathan leaned back against the counter, feigning surprise. "Did you?" She set her glass down, folding her arms. "Don't insult me, Nathan. We both know it was you." His smirk didn't fade. "I wouldn't call it firing. More like redirecting your priorities. You don't need a job when you have me." Sophia let out a slow exhale, her fingers tightening around the counter. This was the moment she knew. Nathan didn't just want control, he wanted ownership. "You think you can buy my life," she murmured. "That if you take away enough, I'll have no choice but to stay." He stepped closer, confidence radiating from every movement. "It's not about buying, sweetheart. It's about protecting. About making sure you don't waste time chasing things that don't matter." Sophia lifted her chin, eyes dark with a fury she no longer bothered to hide. "My work matters." Nathan shrugged, unbothered. Not anymore. And that's when she did something he didn't expect. She laughed. Soft at first, then full, sharp-edged amusement that made his smirk slip for the first time that night. Nathan frowned. "What's so funny?" Sophia shook her head, stepping away from the counter, her laughter dying down into something cold, something lethal. "You're scrambling," she said simply. Nathan's jaw tightened. "Excuse me?" Sophia gestured around them at the penthouse he had tried to trap her in, at the world he was so desperate to control. "You don't know what to do with me, do you? Every woman you've ever been with has needed you. And now you're standing in front of one who doesn't." Nathan's fists clenched at his sides. "You're my wife." Sophia's eyes gleamed. "A wife you can't control." Silence. For the first time, Nathan had no response. Sophia took a step forward, her voice a whisper, lethal and sure. "You can try to break me, Nathan, but you'll never own me." Then she brushed past him, walking out of the kitchen, leaving him standing there, drowning in the weight of his own powerlessness. The next day, he escalated again. Sophia's bank accounts, frozen. Her contacts, blocked. Her emails, deleted. Every single thing she had built, he wiped it away with a single command. When she woke up that morning and checked her phone, she already knew what she'd find. She should have been afraid. She should have been devastated, but all she felt was rage. That night, Nathan came home expecting a fight, but instead he found a war. Sophia was waiting for him in the living room, standing beside her suitcase. Packed, ready, done. He froze. "What is this?" Sophia exhaled, slow and measured. "I'm leaving." Nathan's breath left him in a rush. "You're what?" She met his gaze, unwavering. "I let you play your little game. I let you try to control me. But here's the thing about power, Nathan." She stepped forward, voice like steel. "It only works if I let it." Nathan's pulse roared in his ears. "You think you can just walk away from me?" Sophia let out a soft, pitying smile. "I don't think, Nathan. I know." His control, his empire, his rules, his power. None of it had ever touched her. And now? Now he was the one left behind. Nathan Caldwell had spent his entire life untouchable. His world was built on power, manipulation, and control, until Sophia Devereaux walked in and burned it to the ground. He had played his game, tightened his grip, taken everything from her. And yet, she hadn't broken. Number she had waited. And now, she was about to destroy him. It started at a charity gala, one of Nathan's most prestigious events. A night where Miami's elite gathered to sip expensive champagne, bid on overpriced art, and whisper about fortunes made and lost. Nathan had prepared for an appearance of perfection. He had chosen Sophia's gown himself, a sleek red dress meant to showcase her as his possession. She wore black instead. The moment she walked in, heads turned, conversation slowed. The shift in power was instant. Nathan tightened his grip around his drink, forcing a smile as he leaned in close. "You're making a scene." Sophia swirled her wine, eyes flicking around the room. "Am I?" Then she smiled and struck. "Ladies and gentlemen," she called out suddenly, her voice ringing across the ballroom. "Since we're here to talk about generosity, why don't we discuss something truly remarkable? The man who claims to be the face of philanthropy, Nathan Caldwell." Nathan's spine locked. The crowd turned, watching, waiting. Sophia stepped forward, her expression composed but lethal. A man who donates millions to charity while secretly destroying small businesses. A man who preaches about economic growth while ruining lives for his own gain. Murmurs erupted. Eyes darted toward Nathan. His jaw clenched. He reached for her arm, voice low and warning. "Sophia." She pulled away, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't touch me." The room fell into absolute silence, a single moment of perfect destruction. Nathan had always been in control, always dictated the narrative, always controlled the optics. Not tonight. Tonight, Sophia had turned his empire against him, and as she walked away, leaving him exposed, humiliated, powerless, Nathan felt it. The fear of losing everything. After that night, something shifted. Nathan could feel it, the walls closing in. His business deals were suddenly questioned. His investors hesitated. And worst of all, Sophia didn't leave. She stayed in the penthouse, calm, untouched, smiling. Nathan watched her carefully, analyzing every move. But that was the problem, wasn't it? He couldn't predict her anymore, and that drove him insane. It got worse. His meetings mysteriously got rescheduled. His private calls were interrupted. His own staff started hesitating around him. Then one night he found her in his office, sitting in his chair, drinking his whiskey, waiting. Nathan stilled. "What the hell are you doing?" Sophia smiled, slow, dangerous. She placed a file on the desk and slid it toward him. Nathan hesitated before flipping it open. His own business reports, financial loopholes, shadow investments, exposed. His blood turned to ice. Sophia leaned forward, her voice a whisper. "You built an empire on the idea that no one would ever challenge you." She tapped the file. "I'm challenging you." Nathan's fingers tightened around the paper. "You think you can take me down?" Sophia exhaled, her smile never fading. "No, Nathan, I think you're going to take yourself down. I'm just giving you the mirror to watch it happen." And with that, she stood, walking out of his office like she owned it. Nathan stared after her. For the first time in his life, he didn't know what to do. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Nathan had barely slept. His mind was unraveling. Paranoia sank in. Every time he saw Sophia, she looked serene, effortless, like a queen watching a fallen king. Then one night she finally spoke. "You look tired." Nathan exhaled sharply, his patience snapping. "What the hell do you want from me?" Sophia tilted her head. "That's the question, isn't it?" Nathan clenched his fists. "You want revenge?" Sophia chuckled. "Revenge? No, Nathan. I want something much worse for you." She took a step forward, so close he could see the glint in her eyes. "I want you to realize that you're not in control anymore. Not of me, not of this game, not even of yourself." Nathan's throat tightened, because the truth was staring him right in the face. Sophia had won, not by force, not by playing dirty, but by making him destroy himself. She turned, walking toward the door. Then, at the last second, she looked back over her shoulder. "Good night, Nathan." She left. And Nathan? He stood there in the silence of his crumbling empire, realizing he had never really been the one in control. What comes next? What will Nathan do now that he knows he's already lost? Will he finally surrender? Or will he fight for something real? And most importantly, what is Sophia's endgame? Drop a 1 in the comments if you're loving this story. If you want to see Nathan suffer more, well, hit like and stay tuned for what happens next. Trust me, it only gets better. The air inside the penthouse was suffocating. Not because of the space. No, the walls of glass that overlooked the Miami skyline still stretched endlessly, the city twinkling below like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Nathan Caldwell had built his life on control, on power, on knowing exactly how every game would end before it even began. But tonight, he wasn't sure anymore. Across from him, Sophia Devereaux sat with an unsettling calmness, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. Nathan couldn't stop staring. There was something different about her tonight. Something off. It wasn't anger. It wasn't defiance. It was certainty. And that terrified him. Nathan took a slow sip of whiskey, disguising the unease creeping into his bones. "So," he said casually, leaning back, "are we going to keep up this little Cold War, or are you finally ready to admit you've lost?" Sophia exhaled softly, almost amused. "Lost?" she repeated, tilting her head. "Nathan, you're the one who doesn't even realize the game you're playing." His smirk twitched slightly. "And what game is that?" Sophia finally set her glass down. And then she looked at him, really looked at him, the kind of stare that peeled skin from bone. "Nathan," she said, her voice quiet. "Do you remember the name Devereaux?" Nathan's expression didn't change. but his stomach dropped. The name sent a flicker of something through his mind, a shadow, a memory buried so deep he hadn't even thought about it in years. And yet, he knew. The smirk slipped. "What are you talking about?" Sophia leaned forward, placing her elbows on the table. Her voice didn't rise, didn't waver. "You don't remember the Devereaux family?" she pressed. "A small investment firm, a father who spent years building something from the ground up, a company that had one shot at survival before someone crushed it overnight." Nathan blinked. His throat went dry. That wasn't possible. He gripped his glass a little tighter. "That was years ago. A failed business. A business you destroyed." Sophia cut in sharply. Nathan's pulse quickened. This didn't make sense. This wasn't part of the game. Sophia stood up, stepping closer. "That company," she continued, her voice sharper now, "wasn't just a business. It was my father's life, his legacy. And you, Nathan, you didn't just kill a corporation." Nathan's breathing turned shallow. Sophia was close now, so close he could feel the cold fury radiating off of her. "You took everything from him," she whispered. "And when he lost it all, when you made sure he had nothing left, he gave up." A pause, a silence so heavy it pressed against the walls. Then, he killed himself. Nathan's world stopped. His grip on the glass tightened until his knuckles went white. Sophia's eyes never left his. "And you? You walked away richer, stronger, untouched." She let out a slow, bitter laugh. "You didn't even look back, did you?" Nathan swallowed, his heartbeat roaring in his ears. He had ruined hundreds of businesses. He had crushed competitors without a second thought. But this wasn't a business deal anymore. This was personal. Sophia exhaled, shaking her head. "You think I married you for money?" she asked, voice tinged with dark amusement. "You think I wanted to be here? With you?" Nathan felt the room spin. His fingers trembled against the glass. This entire time he had thought he was the one pulling the strings, that he was controlling her, but he had been playing her game from the beginning. "You planned this," he muttered, realization dawning. Sophia's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. "Of course I did." The weight of her words slammed into him like a wrecking ball. The cold acceptance, the quiet patience, the way she had never truly fought back, because she had been waiting for this moment. Nathan pushed back from the table, standing abruptly. You used me?" Sophia tilted her head slightly. "Funny, isn't it?" she mused. "A man like you, who spent his life treating people like pawns, finally realizing he's been the pawn all along." Nathan felt sick. The whiskey burned in his throat, but it couldn't drown the creeping realization that he had already lost. He paced. He ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "No," he muttered, shaking his head. This doesn't change anything." Sophia laughed, a soft, mocking sound. "Nathan," she said, voice gentle but sharp, "this changes everything." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time since they met, since this war began, he felt something he had never felt before. Fear, not fear of losing her, fear of what she was capable of, what she had already done. Sophia took a step back. "I didn't come here for love," she murmured. Nathan's throat tightened. "I came here to watch you break." She grabbed her coat from the chair, sliding it over her shoulders. Nathan felt his world tilt, a reality he had spent years controlling now slipping through his fingers. And then, before walking out the door, she glanced at him one last time, a simple, quiet look, and 3 words that shattered him completely. "Game over, Nathan." She left. Nathan stood there, frozen. His empire was still standing. His wealth was still intact. But he had never felt so ruined. After that night, Nathan doubled down. He tried to control her time, insisting she no longer needed to work. She ignored him and went anyway. He started manipulating their schedules, making her wait hours for simple conversations. She never reacted. He arranged exclusive dinner parties, expecting her to be his arm candy. She attended, but never played the role he wanted. It was driving him insane. Women had always melted under his attention, submitted to his authority, surrendered to his world, but not Sophia. She was a fortress, one he couldn't break, and with each passing day, Nathan felt something foreign creeping into his bones. Panic. A week later, he tried again. This time, with something more personal, more calculated. He arranged for her favorite author to attend a private book event, an exclusive invitation, something money couldn't buy. That night, he sat at the head of the dining table, swirling a glass of whiskey, watching as Sophia entered the room. "I got you something," he said smoothly. She arched an eyebrow, waiting. Nathan pulled a sleek white envelope from his jacket and placed it on the table. "An evening with—" "Let me stop you right there," Sophia interrupted. Nathan frowned. She stepped forward slowly, deliberately, placing her hands on the table. Then she leaned in. "You still don't get it, do you?" Her voice was soft, almost pitying. Nathan stared at her, silent. Sophia let out a slow exhale, shaking her head. "You think control comes in the form of gifts, schedules, and manipulation. But real control? It's never about those things. Real control is knowing you don't need to prove anything to anyone, and that's what's killing you." She straightened, grabbing the envelope from the table. Then, without even opening it, she tore it in half. Nathan's fingers dug into the armrest of his chair. His pulse roared in his ears. Sophia's expression never changed. She just turned and walked away, leaving Nathan sitting there, suffocating under the weight of something he had never felt before. Powerlessness. As the days passed, Sophia's hold over him only grew stronger, but not in the way he expected. She wasn't winning through control. She was winning by simply existing outside of his influence. And Nathan, for the first time, realized something terrifying. He wasn't just losing the game, he was losing himself. Because in a life where he had always dictated the rules, always held the power, Sophia Devereaux had just rewritten them. What comes next? Will Nathan finally break? Or will he fight back harder than ever? And most importantly, who is truly in control? Comment below. If you're loving this story, drop a 1 and hit subscribe for the next chapter. If you don't like it, well, hit like anyway. Let's keep the game going. The Miami skyline stretched endlessly before her, the city's golden glow reflecting against the water. The world around her was alive, cars speeding across the bridge, laughter spilling from rooftop bars, waves lapping against the shore. It was a city that never stopped moving, and neither would she. Sophia Devereaux stood at the edge of the marina, the crisp night air brushing against her skin, the weight of her past finally lifting from her shoulders. Behind her, the world she once fought against was crumbling. Nathan Caldwell was nothing more than a ghost now, a man stripped of his power, his arrogance, his ability to control. And she was free. She didn't say goodbye to him in person. Nathan didn't deserve that. She had left the penthouse without a second glance, her heels echoing against the marble floors, knowing he was watching. She could feel his presence, the unspoken plea in his silence, the desperation he refused to voice, but she didn't stop, didn't hesitate, didn't look back because he was no longer part of her story. When she stepped into the elevator, she exhaled slowly, pressing the button to the ground floor. A new beginning. Not for him, for her. She had spent months in that penthouse, surrounded by luxury that never felt like hers. Now, standing in her own space, in her own world, she realized something. She had won. Not because she had destroyed him, not because she had taken everything from him, but because she had chosen herself. There was no satisfaction in his suffering, no joy in his regret. His downfall had never been her endgame. Her freedom was. Sophia walked through her new apartment, the space small but entirely hers. No marble floors, no chandeliers, no overpriced art pieces Nathan had thrown money at to impress people he didn't even respect. But it was real. The sun filtered through the windows in a way it never did in the penthouse, warming her skin instead of bouncing off cold glass. There were books stacked on the shelves, dishes in the sink, a half-finished manuscript on her desk, signs of a life in motion, signs of a life that belonged to her. No one dictated what she wore. No one controlled her schedule. No one told her what she could or couldn't be. For the first time in years, she had absolutely nothing to prove. And that was power. Days passed. She expected him to call. He didn't. He wouldn't. Nathan Caldwell had never been the type to beg. But one day, she received an envelope, delivered to her door by a courier. No return address, just her name. Sophia opened it slowly, her fingers steady, her expression unreadable. Inside, a single piece of paper, handwritten. I don't know how to fix what I've done, but I know you were right. I never deserved you. Live the life I never let you have. No signature. Nothing else. Just that. Sophia let out a slow breath, then folded the letter and placed it on the counter. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but she knew it didn't change anything, because redemption wasn't hers to give. She had already moved on. There was no romantic reunion, no bittersweet moment of forgiveness, no lingering stares across crowded rooms. Because some stories don't end with reconciliation. Some stories end with a woman choosing herself. Sophia had fought her battle. She had won. And winning meant never looking back. That night she walked along the beach, the waves brushing against her ankles, the ocean stretching endlessly into the horizon. A soft breeze carried the scent of salt and freedom. She closed her eyes, let the sound of the water drown out the past. And then, with a small smile, she kept walking, into a future that was entirely her own. The city stretched before him, endless and indifferent. Nathan Caldwell stood on the edge of his penthouse balcony, his hands gripping the railing, his breath slow and heavy. The skyline still glittered. The streets below still pulsed with life. Miami hadn't stopped, but he had. For the first time in his life, Nathan Caldwell had nothing. Once, this city belonged to him. With a single call, he could control stock prices, erase competitors, bend the world to his will. But now he was invisible. His name had been scrubbed from the walls of Caldwell Enterprises. His fortunes drained by lawsuits, betrayals, and debts he never thought he'd have to pay. The world had turned its back on him, just as easily as he had once discarded people who were no longer useful. But it wasn't the money that haunted him. It wasn't even the power. It was her. His grip on the railing tightened. Sophia. Her name echoed in his mind. A relentless ghost he couldn't shake. She had walked away without looking back. She hadn't waited for him to change. Hadn't wasted time hoping he would become a better man. Because she had known the truth. Some men never change. Nathan let out a bitter laugh, and yet, here he was. Alone. Drowning in the silence. He had thought he controlled everything. That money could fix anything. That power meant he would never lose. But power couldn't make her stay. Wealth couldn't erase what he had done. And control? It had never been his to begin with. Nathan closed his eyes, the weight of his own failure pressing against his chest. He had spent his life chasing status, domination, victories that meant nothing. He had destroyed lives without thinking, had ruined people without caring. And now he was the one left in the wreckage. The wind rushed against his face as he stared down at the city, at the empire he had once ruled. He saw his reflection in the glass doors behind him. A man who once commanded boardrooms. A man who once made empires fall with a signature. A man who now had no one left. Nathan had always thought he could live without love, that emotions made men weak. But in the end, it wasn't love that destroyed him. It was the absence of it. He let out a slow, shaky breath. For the first time in his life, he wanted to turn back time, to undo the damage, to be someone worth forgiving. But there were no second chances, no grand gestures, no cinematic moments of redemption. Sophia was gone. And Nathan? Nathan was just a man staring at a city that no longer cared he existed. What comes next? Will Nathan let his downfall consume him? Or will he finally learn what it means to change? And most importantly, is redemption even possible? If you think Nathan got exactly what he deserved, comment below. But if you believe no one is beyond redemption, drop a and tell me why. Because this story, it's far from over. Nathan Caldwell had always been a man of certainty. He knew how to win. He knew how to break people. He knew how to control everything around him. But now, he wasn't sure of anything. He stood at the edge of his penthouse balcony, the Miami skyline sprawling before him. It was the same view he had stared at for years, the city moving beneath him like a machine he had once controlled. But tonight it felt distant, unreachable. Because for the first time in his life, Nathan had nothing. It had started with the scandals, then the lawsuits, then the investors backing out one by one. Nathan had spent his entire career burying his enemies. Now, he was the one being buried. The headlines told the story before he even had time to react. Caldwell empire collapses, corruption and fraud exposed. Once Miami's most powerful CEO, now a disgraced nobody. The rise and fall of Nathan Caldwell, a cautionary tale. He had built an empire, and in a matter of weeks it had been burned to the ground. But none of it mattered. Not really. Because the real loss, the one that kept him awake at night, was Sophia. Nathan had spent years believing that people were replaceable, that no matter what he lost, he could always build something new, find someone new, start over. But Sophia had been different. She had walked into his life unshaken by his power. She had seen through him in a way no one else ever had. She had never feared him, and now she had left him behind. Nathan had always assumed that if he wanted something badly enough, he could take it. That if he fixed himself, if he proved he had changed, she would come back. So he tried. He cut ties with corrupt business partners. He donated millions to the people he had ruined. He started from nothing, hoping to rebuild without the greed that had defined him for so long. But Sophia, she didn't care, because her absence wasn't a punishment. It was her choice. And that was the part that broke him. One evening, a courier arrived at his door. A small, unmarked envelope. No return address. Nathan opened it with steady hands, even as his chest tightened with something he refused to name. Inside, a letter. Nathan, I heard about what you're trying to do. Good. I hope you keep doing it, not for me, not for redemption, but because you finally understand what it means to be human. But that doesn't mean I'm coming back. Some things, once broken, can never be rebuilt. Be well. Sophia. Nathan read it once, then again, then again. Each word felt like a blade, cutting deeper than any loss he had ever experienced. He had spent years crushing people without a second thought. And now, for the first time, he understood what it felt like to be on the other side. Sophia hadn't left because she wanted revenge. She had left because she knew she deserved better, and nothing he did would ever change that. Nathan stood in the silence of his empty penthouse, staring at the letter in his hands. For the first time in his life, he had no one left to manipulate, no more deals to make, no more power plays to win. Just himself, and the crushing weight of regret. He walked to the balcony, gripping the railing with white-knuckled hands. Below, the city still pulsed with life. People moved on. But Nathan? Nathan was stuck. He thought back to every moment he had spent with Sophia. The first time she had challenged him. The first time he had realized he couldn't control her. The moment she had walked away, without hesitation, without looking back. And now he finally got it. Some things don't get a second chance. Some mistakes can't be undone. Some people don't come back. Days passed. Then weeks. Nathan kept trying, kept pushing forward, kept working to be a better man. But the world had already moved on from him. His name was no longer whispered in boardrooms. His presence no longer commanded fear. His empire was nothing but a cautionary tale. He had spent his entire life believing that power was everything. But what did power mean when you had no one left to share it with? Nathan sat in the dim light of his apartment, staring at the letter one last time. There was no redemption here, no grand love story, just a man who had learned his lesson far too late, and a woman who had chosen herself. Nathan exhaled slowly, closing his eyes. For the first time, he didn't reach for his phone to make a call, didn't try to fix what was already gone, because some endings aren't meant to be rewritten, and this was one of them. The world doesn't stop for regret. It doesn't wait for apologies. It doesn't pause for second chances. It moves forward. And those who can't keep up, they get left behind. Nathan Caldwell learned that lesson the hard way. For years he had walked through life untouchable. He crushed people without hesitation, controlled them without conscience, and lived as if the world owed him its submission. He never thought about consequences. Until the day Sophia walked away. And the moment the door closed behind her, he realized she wasn't waiting for him to change. She wasn't hoping he'd wake up and finally become the man she deserved. She had already decided. And he had already lost. Nathan spent months trying to undo the damage. He tried to be better. He tried to make amends. He tried to prove that he had changed. But redemption isn't something you can demand. And by the time he realized what mattered, it was already too late. Sophia was gone, and she had no intention of coming back. Here's a truth people don't like to admit. Not everyone deserves forgiveness. Not everyone should be given another chance. And sometimes the only justice that truly exists is making sure they live with what they've done. Nathan had spent years believing he could always rebuild, always restart, always find another way. But what happens when the one thing you need is the one thing you can't buy back? What happens when you wake up and realize you weren't just playing a game? You were gambling with something real. And now, it's gone. Nathan didn't lose because Sophia wanted revenge. He lost because she finally understood something. Some men don't change, and even if they do, it's not her job to wait for them to figure it out, because waiting for someone to treat you right is just another way of letting them waste your time. To the Nathans of the world, you don't get unlimited chances. You don't get to break people and expect them to stick around. You don't get to wake up one day, finally see the damage you've caused, and demand forgiveness. Because by the time you realize what you had, they'll already be gone, and you'll have to live with that for the rest of your life. To the Sophias of the world, not everyone is worth waiting for. Not every story ends with a redemption arc, and not every man who says, "I've changed," actually deserves another chance to prove it. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away, without waiting, without looking back, without doubting if you made the right choice. Because when justice is real, it's not about revenge, it's about knowing your worth, and making sure they know it too. The story is over, or maybe it's just beginning. Not for them, for you. Sophia Devereaux made a choice that some people would never understand. She walked away. She didn't wait for an apology. She didn't need closure, because closure isn't something someone else gives you. It's something you take for yourself. Nathan Caldwell lost everything. He lost his company, his status, his power. But the real loss, the one he'd never recover from, was her. Because some people only realize your value when you're no longer there. And by then, it's too late. Would you have done the same? Would you have walked away without looking back? Or do you believe people deserve second chances? Is redemption real? Or are some people simply beyond saving? Because this isn't just a story. It's a question, a test. And your answer says more than you think. Not every love story is meant to be rewritten. Not every villain gets to be redeemed. And not every woman needs to forgive the man who broke her. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't to fight, it's to leave. And let them fight with themselves, because the greatest punishment is knowing they had something priceless and let it slip through their fingers. You've heard the story. Now tell me, did Sophia make the right decision? Would you have given Nathan a second chance? Or do you believe some things can never be forgiven? Let's settle this. Because one thing is certain, no one decides your worth except you. There comes a moment in every person's life when they have to make a choice, not just about love, not just about relationships, but about self-worth. Sophia Devereaux didn't walk away because she was heartless. She walked away because she knew her value. Because staying in a situation where someone has to learn how to love you isn't love. Waiting for someone to realize your worth is a waste of time, and hoping a man will change is a risk you should never have to take. She didn't leave because she wanted revenge. She left because she refused to settle. And that's the lesson. A woman who knows her worth doesn't beg for respect. She doesn't wait for someone to treat her right. She doesn't let anyone define what she deserves, because when you stay in a situation that forces you to fight for basic decency, you're already losing. And when you finally walk away, the power shifts. not because they realize what they lost, but because you finally understand what you deserve. So the question is, are you fighting for something real? Or are you holding on to something that was never meant for you? Because one thing is certain, no one will ever value you more than you value yourself. If this story resonated with you, let's talk about it. Do you think Sophia made the right choice? Would you have done the same? Drop a comment below. Let's hear your thoughts. And if you believe that no one should ever settle for less than they deserve, hit like, share this video, and don't forget to subscribe. Because this is just the beginning.